Sunday, Geshe is going to give the solitary Vajrasattva initiation. The solitary Vajrasattva initiation on Sunday, but be mindful of the time. It's noon to 2 o'clock Toronto time. So it's a 2 hours later start time than what we usually have on Sundays. This will be, of course, if you're in Ontario, please come in person, but this will also be available for folks at home. However, you have to tune in real time. It's going to be in real time on Zoom. We won't have it like on YouTube or Facebook, and it won't be available to watch later. So if you're interested, please check out the Zoom details and log into Zoom. The following Sunday after that, at the normal start time of 10 o'clock in the morning, Geshe will give some teachings on the Vajrasattva purification practice. The Saturday before that will be the Vajrayogini commentary. So Vajrayogini on the Saturday, then the Vajrasattva commentary on the Sunday. And that's the second weekend in June. The third weekend of June, we start our new round of teachings on the gradual path, the Lamrim text by the fifth Dalai Lama, Manjushri's words, along with gloss commentary by His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. So that is kind of how things are looking this month going forward. Also, don't forget on the 11th, which is the very important Holy Buddha Day of Sagadawa, at 8 a.m. Eastern Time, so Toronto, New York Eastern Time, Geshe will give the Bodhisattva vows along with a transmission of King of Prayers. So it's a great chance to renew those vows and to start the day in a very positive way. For those with Vajrayogini initiation, Paula Chichester will also lead a Vajrayogini session on that day on the 11th. So check our website for details on that. And then the evening of the 11th, there'll be a student-led recitation practice of some of the prayers that Lama Zopa Rinpoche had recommended for special days. So I think that that is all of the announcements I have. Please grab yourself a cup of tea or coffee. Get yourself comfortable. I'll invite Geshe down and we will get started in 1 or 2 minutes. So welcome everybody. Let's just do a quick sound check on my mic. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, Chiro
And Geshe is saying hello, Dharma friends. Can everyone hear him clearly? Great. Okay. So welcome.
뭐야 다 강가 자시 데레 또 tane 다 강가 야본로 시여와 첨부 요스.
So first of all, Tashi Dele, greetings. Geshe hopes that you are happy and that all is going well.
어떤 지레데 tane 다 가로서 강가 tane. 다 요사테 다 된돌 요아레스. 된돌 요바 노지가 다 로서서 된디테 자체와테 다 ngoshi 바존에 다 tane 기보치는 로그 요아레스.
So all of us, we share sort of a common characteristic in that we have been reborn in the favorable realms, the favorable states of existence. And in fact, because of this, we have the basis, a very good basis for spiritual practice in our hands. So it's important to recognize this and to feel joy.
다 여보 따와이네 다 좀벌린데라 따와이나요 다 가로서 멋지바이마이나요 다 니네 된돌 된디테 임발 다 만라와치 텐데레 디와르테 여보 ngoshi 바존에 텔 바페트네 레가 여보 체크요레스.
And so another thing we have to take into account is that even when we look within these favorable or higher realms, if we look, for example, in the human realm, there are all sorts of different circumstances that human beings have. And we should keep in mind that even when we look at the circumstances of other humans, right, we are particularly fortunate. We have a very good basis for practice.
다로로 소소거든 저왕 아마티가 다 내가 퍼스 초바즈선에 다 가로서 그게 때 만다와 다는 로로 소소 다 류바이나요 다 유아 보지를 그게 제저요레스.
So, it's because in our previous lifetimes, we exerted ourselves in accumulating what is wholesome, positive karma, that we now have this opportunity, that we have the basis of this form and also being born in a country or in a place where we're able to practice.
저 시원에 시와 챈들이나요. 시원에 시와를 여른로도 다 드른로세하데 아니 연다 하도 던데 스질을 라발면 소소로 소소를 라발요 아레스.
So another thing that we need to keep in mind is that as we go from lifetime to lifetime, whether we continue in the favorable higher rebirths, get better and better, or whether the rebirths get more and more difficult into the lower realms and so forth, this is not something that we can petition any sort of deity, any sort of God to help us with. This is something that is determined by our own actions, right? The responsibility is in our hands.
다루루 소소 뭐제 지겠다 뭐제 지게 놀로이나요 뭐제가 다 동비가 다발 범에가 돈이라 달래가 남마다 노아 뭐 텐데 용시 시바지레스.
And so, how do we fall into those difficult states? Well, we can think about in our own life, right? Due to heedlessness, due to a lack of mindfulness, there are times when we are going to make mistakes, right?
다 이나요 멀리 때 여보 레바 여본 되게 다 노아지 뭐시 바존에 거게 레가 여보 전에 다 로토바이나 아니 바이가 돈은 로토바이는 게 멀리 들어가라바 노지 시티는 요하러 왔어. 다와 팀바도 타와 노지 오츠마 차요 아레스.
So what we have to do is, if we recognize our good situation, if we recognize that we have this favorable human rebirth, we can reduce our mistakes, we can recover our heedfulness, we can bring forth that mindfulness. And then, just as Nagarjuna says in Letter to a Friend, it is like a moon that was once covered with clouds, but is now unobscured, right? We can change those habits.
어떤 노근노라요 뭐요 아레 세모 청와라 소바다 드리 빼죠 아니라 뭐세 돈벌로 레가 노아 첨보 타말라 다 할레비 비타보 여보 차스나.
And so within the sutras, within the collected discourses of Lord Buddha, there are also many accounts of beings, for example, like Angulimala, who had killed so many people. But then, upon seeing the wrongness of his ways, he was able to reform himself and in that very lifetime reach realization.
어떻게 되디야 디고르게 좀 오시에 차임바스 간조시 고시와 가마가르레 무세텔 길레가 노아 가르치어서 대신 말로지 뭐시에 차임바스
도마쳤는데 수야로.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so in the scriptures, it talks about Angulimala, this man who was a murderer before he became a monk and reached realization. It talks about the conditions of his previous lifetimes that had led to that point, right? With the Buddhist clairvoyance, he explained about that. And then it talks about how he reformed and the future result.
어다 나로서 관계 야 뭐지 고사 지말라리바 이나 요새 때라다 할레비 관계 첨부 어디바 첨부서 앞에 다 드늘래가 뭐지 바레스
And
이나요 타만 된 리지라 되는 원도 아니 양안조 패트 야 도자 타디 손지 살패도 소와스
so also, if we think about Lord Milarepa, another very famous example of somebody who was a greatly sinful person, right? Was killing and involved in so many negative deeds. But then on the basis of realizing the preciousness of the basis of that human rebirth, on the basis of transforming his mind and behavior, in that very same lifetime where he had made all those mistakes, he was able to reform and eventually in one lifetime to reach complete enlightenment.
어다 셋텔 다 할레비 피도 본로 계시고도 뭐지 뭐세 돈벌을 할레비 때는 디필에 차 첨부서는 저한테 뭐버레스
So there are many, many stories actually in the Buddhist tradition of beings who were holy beings, but who in the earlier part of their lives had been involved in a great deal of negativity and harm. So this type of positive change is possible.
어다 땡이 지체 가르치기요. 알아서 뭐 옹이 무슨 놀라 누워 뭐 사서 쓰는 데는 다가서 이제 와서는 다세 줘서는 내게 뭐 용기 알아봤어. 대질로 소소 그 주보도 드리나요. 파실라자자네. 단저 와도 야겠다네. 내가서 그랬어.
So why is Geshe sharing this? Because one of the things he hears, especially in this part of the world, is people kind of holding on to their mistakes, regretting their mistakes, but that regret becomes a form of guilt, which is kind of thinking, oh, I made all of these mistakes, so there is no hope for me now, right? But in the scriptures, it tells us very clearly all of these examples of beings who made mistakes were able to change and were able to reach a great result. So that's something that we need to keep in mind to encourage ourselves. And those are also stories that we should tell our friends to encourage them as well.
어다 때요 본데요는 디톨 뽑아 첨부치 다 보게 로바 요바이나 가르 이나에다 누가 강한 저와도네 다 여벌을 저와도 도움이 하겠어.
On the basis of this human rebirth, if we combine it with an attitude of courage, we can definitely change in a positive way from that mistaken person that we were to a more positive direction. This is absolutely for sure.
어떤지 지레스 드네요 다 시부 돈바스가 라자 쪼지 되는 가로서 니가게 대시 타투게 대시 가른 뇨와 이나요 뇨지기 잘라 강가로 소설 라빨이 요아레스.
The holy beings also tell us that any type of temporary happiness that we want to experience, any type of ultimate happiness that we want to experience, to be able to secure the causes for that, we have everything that we need in our hands, in our situation right now.
구한다고 이네래 못한다고 이네래 다 되는 노버가 잘라 침부터는 요아이는 다 빼야 이니 메지 변전다고 지타시선 어디자 가라왔어.
So we know, for example, that if we're somebody who aspires to have a really nice car, a large house, if we like to collect and wear precious gems and different kinds of ornaments, we know that in order to secure those things, we need to be really determined in our work to secure the money to be able to buy them.
다 던지게 되는 요토바 이나이 대시 요도 많이 써야 되고 단다 코프게 태소지려마도 땡보 요 말이스.
But the question you have to ask yourself about that approach is, if I work really hard, save that money, and buy those things that I want, is that really going to make me happy or not? And you'll see that you can't be sure without a doubt that those things will actually bring you happiness.
다 나로서 던지 요다 먹여봐라 로소서 세게 노는 쇼바 니지 쇼주게 세. 다 예수 파시주가 뇨레르지 니가게 대시 타두게 대시 강한 요지게 잘라 주저래 돼 하레스.
So what if we were to think instead about the inner jewels that we could work towards achieving, like love, compassion, bodhicitta, the 6 paramitas or perfections, and so forth, right? How would those work? They would be able to bring us not just that temporary, but also that ultimate happiness.
다 버스초바 시라 버스초바 다 소생에는 가르 배제 또나에 땡데 또때 싱거래 또 토기 와래 다 루소서 야 보잖아.
Method and wisdom, right? We've listened to so many teachings about those. So we should know how to use those practices in the right situation. And if we do that, then there is no doubt that we can eventually come to the point of realization.
어따 대인이 면세를 냐에 같이 뭐래서 어따 루소설 인에 제와요 루소설 그게 대신에 그거요나 대신 녀야가 잘라간 거 소설은 뉴아스.
So that's really important to keep in mind, right? That if we really have compassion for ourselves, there's so much talk about self-compassion, then we want to be happy, right? And all of those things that we need to achieve that lasting, meaningful happiness, they are available for our purchase, right? They are these internal things that we can bring forth. We just have to work in order to get them.
어따 니까게 대시 타투게 대시 다 럼바셔다 가르도 다 대시 가르 그거요나 당하로서 더 토야게 다 잘라간 거 소설은 뉴스.
Everything within us that we need to bring forth temporary and ultimate happiness is there. There is nothing ultimately that is beyond our reach.
어따 던지게 잘라 대지요 요 세제레레도 내와요 아이자 세제 스도 투바이는 스도 다 tre바이는 자 전부 저거야 저 토야 되다 같이 뭐래 돼요. 레스.
But in order to bring forth those internal things, those qualities in a way that is going to help us achieve temporary and ultimate happiness, what does this depend on? It depends upon the relationships that we cultivate with others. It is through interacting with others that we are going to be able to achieve those. And for that reason, every single being that we gaze upon, every person that we encounter, we should have a feeling that they are precious. We should have a feeling that they are close to us.
타마 쇼바 타심바 아니지 타심바 제바 타심바 용야시 기대 소소야 지복은 더 말아왔어. 얘라 때는 이미 미지 더 그요. 레스.
So when we talk about perfecting love, perfecting compassion, perfecting patience, these qualities don't reach their perfection just by us sort of being alone, just by us doing things on an individual level, right? Those qualities reach perfection through the interactions that we have with others. So therefore, our realization depends upon others. They are close to us.
어다 자샤도 마서 자샤가체데 소지도 소지 선비가리 자샤가체데 선제가리 다 시버래야 돼요. 레스.
So when we think about this way, right, you know, that old saying that we've heard so many times that what we achieve in our practice, 50% of that is due to the kindness and blessings of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, and 50% of that is due to the kindness of other sentient beings. It really starts to make sense, right?
어다 선제를 소화치네 매바치 안에서 야 소지도 전제 선발소스 차차 제와 빈담마라서 다 대고 따다 놓여 말레스.
So if we have absolutely no feeling for other sentient beings and just kind of really want them to go away, but then when it comes to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, we do all kinds of prostrations and make offerings and have all of this faith and respect, that doesn't really match up, right? That doesn't really make sense.
어다 드리지랜드 어다 드리지자 가빙은 로타가 다 잘라 몸보지 소설은 뒤다 이제 다 기워지는 거기 있어.
So we have so many things that we need to be able to cultivate happiness. And so our job in this context is to recognize this and to proceed in our practice with joy, right? That joy is so important.
어야 당연도 당간서 레레지는 거야 있어.
So we'll do just some preliminary meditations to get started.
중앙에서 같이 모인 중앙에서 찬양 받아 할래주 할래비 같이 모이 좀 받지를 대쇼스.
So much of our physical and mental health depends upon a correct balance of the four elements. So as we still our body and mind, imagine that the four elements come into equilibrium.
뭐칼 뒷반장만한 뭐지다 봐. 뒷발류게 돼봐. 너저 룰 소설 해야 되나? 좀에 소화하고는 너도 아니를 맞이돼 안로요. 소바지.
So as we focus, as we allow those thoughts and so forth to settle, then think that those unpleasant thoughts, feelings, They're parted like a gentle breeze sweeps away the clouds from the moon at night, and the nature of our mind, like the moon's glow, becomes perceptible.
소소가 다 세대 찜바도 저에 노칸 무지가 봐. 정말 자체뭐 개요 봐. 아니 다시 왔더니 레레지요 소만도.
When those difficult feelings, those discursive thoughts, like the clouds, are parted from the moon of our mind, then the vastness of the mind, its purity, its luminosity becomes observable, and there is a feeling of peace.
세도 초와도 난 ramanda 노동 ramanda 가로 이나요 노칸 무지가. 저거 주사면 봐. 똥바지 마도. 너네 지네 다 든지 소소가 소만 무지지. 저거 주사시 된데만도 소만도.
Whether we think of our mind, of our feelings, of the discursive thoughts, and so forth, if we were to try to find some sort of pinpointable essence, some sort of findable essence, we would not be able to find anything at all. This is the emptiness of the inherent existence.
세대라 때네 답이 나이나요. 우로 소소가 소만 무지. 저거 주사시 자와이나 때네만도 소만.
So,
세대라 때네 답이 나 보자아제. 대요더니 소만 무지 자와이는 저거 주사시만도 소만. 그래.
so the self, or the I, that is merely labeled, that is designated on the basis of my mind, if we try to search for this, if we try to look for it, we will see that it is not findable, does not exist in the way that it appears.
자와 노지요아레 소노토네 차완 잠마다 노돈 잠마다 좀메비타 차와 노도 땡보냐데 단저 주사는 만두 소바다 같이 뭐.
This idea that if we look for some sort of pinpointable essence, we can find it. This mistaken appearance, that is the reason for the arising of all of the discursive thoughts, the difficult feelings and afflictions that arise due to connections with different objects. But if we look for it, if we look for that pinpointable essence, we will not be able to find it.
가제 터더 세 고로 중이야. 뭐 르마테가 돌았다 가제 터더 다 보일래래 되는 샤와도. 아니 돈반다 걸래렌도 소바지.
If we think in this way, we can see that the nature of our mind is vast.
세 고로 뭐 르마테가 뭐 데이터바이나. 아니요. 다 저한다 만다 매바 노돈다 만다 매바 레레 샤와. 뭐다 기워요 바레 소바다.
If we can rest in this nature of the mind, this vast expanse of equanimity, then what we will find is that we become peaceful as we relax into its vastness.
Se koro luma te hina yo, ta kasa papa ta yi, gyawa ya shu, ingo shombi ngwa ya sheni la, ta deshi ki sholan do yi sambachi.
So think on the basis of tapping into the fundamental mind, which is by nature neutral in a state of equanimity, but powerful. We will infuse that mind with an attitude of love that sees all beings as attractive, that holds them close.
So tsendi ge nye yi de ngwa kandi jita ge yina yo, ane me yina yo, tendo yina yo. Nanando wari chu kawata wa yina yo, ta yi de ngwa, o ta za chenpo jiba yi sambachi.
So think first of those beings that are close to you, then of humans, then of animals, then of all the 6 different types of sentient beings within samsara. Develop that feeling that they are close to you. Develop that feeling of gazing upon them with affection, of seeing them as attractive and worthy.
Tendi soma no ji yi de ngwa, ta tenpo ji la xewa, ta shen xe la, ta so, sen so, ta so, ta.
Request the holy beings, may I receive your blessings in my mind, so that every being I encounter, I gaze upon, I can see with affection, I can see as attractive.
Yeah.
So we'll do the recitations. I think we fixed the sound problem, so we'll do them in Tibetan today.
Ah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll begin with the praise to Shakyamuni Buddha. Tumba Jom de Jin She Ba Dra Geshe's raising. Ba Zo Pe Sang Ke Re Ba Dang Shab Su Dem Ba Dewa She Ba Ji Tem Chen Ba Je Bu Du Ve Ka Lo Jor Wa La Na Me Ba La Da Mi Nam Gi Tem Ba Song Ge Chom Den De Pe Jawa Sha Kya Tu Bai Lai Cha Se Lo Che De Kya Su Ji Tumba Chonden De Deje Sheba Chachomba Yonta Zo Pe Sangye Sheba Dang Sha Su Demba Dewa Sheba Jiden Chemba Chebo Dewe Kalo Jorwa Lana Meba Lada Minam Ki Tumba Sangye Chomden De Pe Jawa Sha Kya Tuba Sha Se Lo Che De Kya Su Chi Ho Tumba Chonden De Deje Sheba Chachomba Yonta Zo Pe Sangye Sheba Dang Sha Su Demba Dewa Sheba Shiden Chemba Chebo Dewe Kalo Jowa Lana Meba Lada Mi Namgi Tumba Sangye Chomden De Pe Jawa Shakya Tupa La Chase Lo Chede Kyausu Ji. So the next one, the 7-line prayer to Guru Rinpoche. Ngogin yogin ojan som pema gesa dombola yasen chegin ajanye pema chunde shisu Godu kanjo mambe go kegi jesu da jugi jinji lob chir su su Guru Pe Ma Si. The prayer to clear away obstacles. Dusum Sangye Guru Rinpo Ngodrup Dewa Jembu Bache Kunze Dudu Rabo Ze Solwa Deso Jinji Labdu Su Chinang Sangwe Bache Shiwa Dang Samba Lagi Ruba Jinji Lo Om Ahum Benza Guru
Zangara
Pema
Pema
Sedi
Sadhu
Om
Om,
Benza Guru
Benza
Pema
Guru
Sedi
Pema Sadhu
Om
Om,
Benza
Benza
Guru
Guru
Pema
Pema
Sedi
Sadhu
Om
Om, Benza Guru Pema Sadhu Om, Benza Guru Pema Sadhu
Om Ahum Benza Guru
Guru
Pema
Pema
Sedi
Sadhu
Om Mandala offering.
Sa
Ba
Shiva
shi pe
Pijo
ki ju
Shiji
ji me
Medo
do zhang
Cha
shi ra
Shuja
lin
Di
shi
Jan
ni
Jan
di
De
kian
Gyaba
pa di sang
Sanje
je jin
Shen
de mi
Mi
de
De
mo
Mo
wa
Wa
ye
Ye
zhe ge
Dogon
nan da je ba
Shela
che
Sheba
pa shuo
Shuo
yi dam gu
Yi
zhe rat na men da la
Mendala
ka
kono
ye ya
yada
da
ya
ya mi. Refuge and bodhicitta.
Sonje jido
Chedan
zoja
sogi chenam
jonala
la
Chanchu
chanchu
bada
bada
dani
dani kya
jasa
se chu dagi
dagi
chenyen gibe
Sona
sunam
je
gi
nana
jola
beja
penchir sange
Roba
drupa shu.
Sonje jido
Chedan
zoja
sogi
jonala
chenam la
Chanchu
chanchu
bada
bada
dani
dani kya
jasa
se che dagi chenyen
dagi
gibe
Sona
sunam gi
je
jola
nana beja
penchir sange
Roba
drupa
Shupo
shu.
Sonje Jido
Chedan
Zoja
sogi
Jona
chenam lai chanchu
Chanchu
bada
Bada
dani
Dani
kya
Jasa
se
Jo
che dagi
Dagi
chenyen gipe
Gebe Sona
sunam gi
Je
rola
Dola Me
benjir sangye
Sonje Doba
drapar shu.
오야 다 같이 뭐 될라 다 돈만이 되네 가로서 들이디세 투디 될라 아니 샤와 공샤 바다다 영ön 주에서 총아다 벌써 줘봤지 아니 속이 선받지
So we need to have the thought that today, in order for this time to come to the best possible fruition, I want to, from the outset, pay attention to the activity being complete in the beginning, being complete in the middle, and being complete in the end.
다 영ön 주에서 총아다 벌써 줘봤으네 다 레도 첨보 다또 제수지서 도요하래 다 대소서 소소서 계속 첨보를 했어
And so the reason that we do this is because when the beginning, middle, and end are complete and in place, then the wholesome positive karma that we accumulate is going to be very, very powerful. It's going to really be able to bring us to our aims.
다 가정 만간 저다 시오고 보게 레서도 두시에 차이 봤어
Mhm.
그냥 알아서도 너 미리 가제 템보치네 텔바베 달래 또 첨보도 도요하래스
So last time we talked about how a bird is able to accumulate positive karma and how that can be transformational. But think about doing something positive with the faculties that we have now, with this amazing basis we have as a human being.
로베 이니가 로마 로베 로티 템바 아사데 샤왕가 마텔 코로타 시우 샤지 그트와
Mhm.
로베 이니가 고자사 토피고 또 샤지레 되가레스
So of course, you know the story. It is of Vasubandhu, Lodro Kande Tumpa.
로베 로티 템바
Lodru. Oh, sorry, Lodru. So there was a student of his known as Lodru Thumpa. I will try to find the Sanskrit name for you guys next time because probably you can look up the story. Who, as you know, in the previous life was a bird that was living near Vasubandhu's cave in his younger days.
어다 침물레게 될 유셰게 파 레라고 토네 로지라서 먹니 그다다 시도가 알아있어.
And so in the subsequent rebirth as a human being, when he was born as Lodru Thumpa was able to memorize the first half of a text extremely easily without hardly any effort at all.
어다 그 유셰가 매대 할레가 가고 자기 알아있어. 그 레라고 시도가.
But with the second half, he struggled. He really struggled to learn it, to be able to memorize it and hold it within his mind. And so that was because in the previous lifetime, when he was listening to Vasubandhu recite that text as the bird that was living near his cave, he heard the first half of the text before he would fall asleep during the second half. So Geshe is sharing this with you because there may be times when he's teaching and when you're really listening to what he's saying and when you're being an active listener and trying to understand it. Then there may be other times where you're distracted thinking about something else, or a notification on your device comes, or all of those different types of things. And Geshe says you still get some benefit from that, right? You're still nominally there. You're still, like, through the power of the object of the teaching, accumulating positive karma. But just with that approach, you're not going to be able to establish those deep imprints for realization within your mind. Geshe said that for him and myself, this is like, our responsibility. So we basically have to pay attention whether we like it or not. So at least for these 2 hours, we're fully engaged. But of course, when you're the audience at the teaching, it's a little more difficult. So something positive is going to come, right? Just by making the decision to be present here. But our level of engagement, this is going to determine in terms of the wholesome karma that we accumulate, whether that becomes something really powerful and transformative or not. And Geshe says, he's not just making this up. This is, sourced from the teachings within the sutras that speaks about different types of karma, how, for example, wholesome or positive karma would be, more powerful in some instances and less powerful in others. So we just want, and so to help us kind of with that engagement, we want to bring forth this motivation to have the activity complete in the beginning, the middle, and the end from the outset. And we just want to think that as we do this, we're conceiving of it as like a positive, virtuous seed that we want to plant firmly and nourish really well. So think first, I'm going to calm myself to purify the body and the mind. But we don't want to leave our mind without an object. It's good to have an object of focus. So let us bring the mind's awareness to the rising and falling of the breath, the mindfulness of the breath. Breathing in, I'm aware I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I'm aware I'm breathing out.
루시아츠 마타 리시 데와토 세샤와타 레레초소 소마노.
From the body and mind being purified, my physical state feels comfortable and at ease. My mental state is calm and relaxed.
타응마시타바 노지타 세 니네 고시네 니바차소 다야 고시네 다 센지 스이나요 자쳔보 이데고 니에마도 다지도메 somebody.
So as we mentioned, as we tap into the mind's fundamental nature, we want to cultivate this attitude of seeing beings with affection, seeing them all as attractive. We want to think I am connected to every single sentient being. All of them are close to me. There's not a single sentient being that I could point to and say is definitely my enemy.
센지 세야보데 세르 솜바 존지타 버게 데와토 샤와 어떤 랭에 간가 바쳐바샤와노지 공샤와노지 바신로 야레 소마노.
So think by bringing forth this mind, the sense of closeness with all sentient beings, which is good and pure, then just like a warm rain that falls suddenly can melt away a huge block of ice, all of the negativities, afflictions, and so forth are melted away from my mind.
tendiga nye deda ta tadinnikala ta koyiga nula ta lüdendi o ta tende chigisa kawala majani taba yashul ya chigiga ya diye cheda ani marosu nga seda ta sonji ta taba zoyi somebody.
Because they are so close to me, it wouldn't be suitable for me to work towards my own liberation and leave them behind in the confusion of samsara, cyclic existence. In order to be able to lead them to the state of liberation, I myself must actualize enlightenment, must achieve Buddhahood for their sake, bring forth bodhicitta.
sonji to sonji samba korosu yina ten dindijila tene ta page tempo to ngarosu yina ten de to togere somebody.
Those beings who are Buddhas and Bodhisattvas now, they brought forth this realization on the basis, on the foundation of the birth, the conditions that we have right now. If they could do it, I definitely can also do it.
오다 디가노 디티시메 계시지 다 되면 다 somba 노지 접ala 다 코파게 내가 제한테 다 마지다 당한 정도 그야레스.
So then, in order to be able to actualize that hope that we kind of brought forth here, we need to know the stages through which we can achieve that. And so that brings us to the discussion of our text.
소지 마페 녜네 다 못해 봐도 쇼로바 뭐지가 아니 nga 세대한테 다데 따바레 품보데 못 따바레 서 고로스 따와 오다 든지지게 돈을 올라가 뭐서 요레스.
So before the Buddha propounded his teaching, at that time in India, the spiritual traditions there at that time, many of them were holding a view that the I or the self is permanent, whilst the five skandhas, the aggregates, are impermanent.
다 좀마레 품보 못 좀마레 서 고로스 따왕 냠바진 요레스.
So it was quite, Geshe said, quite a clever view, actually. So, and then because the I was permanent and the skandhas or aggregates were impermanent, the I was pure and unmistaken, and the aggregates or the skandhas were unclean.
나쁘지 라시와레 코로소 미타가즈 마르다 따제 몽보존에 나시데 못하는 저거 요바데 콘조키레게 두아스.
And so, you don't want to just dismiss this view out of hand, because those who propounded it, they came to those conclusions based upon their own long process of scrutinizing investigation and meditation. That's how they came to this view of the self.
다 나로소고 따와테 오다 텐데로 말했어. 다 나요 핀보 못다바 노지 나요 못다바레. 다 이나요 못하는 거다 나세 하는 거버레스.
Oh, so sorry, one thing from the last piece. So, and because of holding that self, right, they held its continuity through different rebirths, through different incarnations. So, in our view, right, we are also holding that there is this continuity. Yet at the same time, our view is different, because it is holding that both the skandhas, both the aggregates, and the I, or the self, are impermanent.
다 나로소는 어디에서 뭐뭐요. 다만 야만도 뭐뭐요. 레스. 나로소 나도 핀보님보테 뭐지바레스. 지르베서는 말레스.
So the I and the aggregates, they are of the same essence, yet at the same time, they're not completely one. They are distinct.
다 문다와 첨보지 가리와르서는 핀보라바도 다티니까로 핀보라바도 아니 뭐지바레스.
So let's unpack this a little bit. So at the moment, the coarse aggregates, for example, we think about the form and the self, or the I. In this current increment of time, they are abiding together, yeah?
다 시와 샤만도비가를 핀보라바티 고자가라와스. 다 디디가를 공간이 어떤 뭐뭐라와처럼.
But when the time to go to the next life happens, necessarily we have to leave the coarse, for example, form aggregate, form skandha of this body behind. But yet that we call the self, or the I, is going to continue into the next incarnation.
그래서 다 아니 핀보 참모지우야레스. 핀보 참모도 아니데 가디나 뭐지바. 다 가디나 뭐지바레스.
But the most gonda pumbo nga chatsangwa chamorwa.
야 대선 핀보 참모진들 그러. 아주 저거 걸어.
So the extremely subtle manifestation, however, of the skandhas or the aggregates, the sort of latencies, the very subtle aspects of that, are still traveling together with that I, or with the self.
어다 나나세데 땡니네 포로 핀빙 니네스 로지 저데요 저봐 가시 저데요나 저요나 예와 가세 셴 코시르시른 로그요 시르시른 로야면 디와스.
So if the I were something that was the younger Sundangone Gotom Sumbet.
아데 마세아테 만에 로지 저데요나 어느 핀보 눈에 가세 짜와 이는 코 시르시르 시워 차비야지와 차야요 말이스.
So if the I, or the self, were truly or inherently existent, then the more effort that we put into trying to identify it somewhere within the skandhas, within the aggregates, the clearer and clearer that I would have to become. But if we investigate that way, it does not become clear.
저절로 소소 잘라 빼나 모변다고 다 촐란도 사기던데이나 어따제서나 따야요아레스 호타카타와인 모베세린 저주다 요반다고 지요아레스 다 코촐란도 사는 간소 카시 추그라와스 카시는 잘라 간가 아파시는 코시는 로야만 디와스 저주다 면로 디와스.
So think, for example, if you've ever had a serious issue with your mobile phone. So normally when you look at that mobile phone, it seems like a cohesive unit. There's really a pinpointable phone there. But when you take the mobile phone to the tech shop, and he takes or she takes off the cover and scatters everything all apart, then that seemingly sort of unitary pinpointable phone, you can't see it there anymore. There's nothing findable anymore.
다 리치 메아 이자 로지치 메 세요아레 때때에서 가서 라근도 와스 레톤비가냐.
So because when you break it down to its parts, it is no longer findable. That is what we mean when we say something 랑징기메르와. Something is not naturally existent.
로지치 메 룽이네 메다 때 구자를 파자. 아니 다 던지 제토가 이는 갈래 던지 거니 몰은 내바지 따다로 도요라스.
So not naturally existent, not existing from its own side. So if we apply this same process of reasoning, for example, to a being, to a person, then we can come to a very good understanding of lack of inherent existence.
어다 로지 매 비슈얼 가제 사 루르서서 따지서나 덴데치 따야레스 녀모 치네 시야와 용거요 말레스.
When we're operating from a place that is comprehending, So questions, yeah, we'll take questions at the end, everyone. I see questions popping up. At the end, we have a half hour for questions, so you'll get plenty of time, but you have to stick around. So that lack of inherent existence, when we're operating from a space that is holding that knowledge, then we will see that the afflictions and so forth are not arising so much.
그래서 어다 녀모 간디지나 루르서서 녀모 라팔 따지서나 하고 그러와스. 로지지 옆에 돈이 조조 보게 녀모디 용거요라스.
So we'll see that when the afflictions are arising, especially very strongly, if we trace back to that conception which they're connected with, we'll see that it's really that holding on to things as naturally, truly, or inherently existent.
어다 던지지야 이자 당가로서 tum바니 세다 자침벌 가침벌 이니 민지 다 디슈론도 가서 아주 자야 지세 디그와스.
So therefore, that's why we say that emptiness is so important. That's why even though it's difficult, we want people to engage with it, why we present these things, because that is the benefit of understanding it.
다 배경 놓치나 다 배경 놓치자 치료 자잖아 뭐 뭐야라와스. 치료지 문다오 첨부지 다 되는 거야라스.
So the teachings about this particular point are one of the sort of major points of variance of the different views that you find within the different schools of the Tibetan Buddhist tradition.
다 로지지 매에서 강가 요 말에 다 됐다와도 그거래서 아주 자기 리지야라스.
So many of the schools were saying that lack of natural existence, the lack of inherent existence, not really existing in the way that it appears, that's the primary point where one needs to put one's attention.
그래서 어다 과제도 다 이렇게 좀 못해서.
Yes, yeah. So the basis of designation, in other words.
어다 좀 뭐래서 갈래 요 주래서.
So there's a broader conversation that unfolds here, which we'll come to incrementally.
어다 유대 리라고 있어 당아도 알게야 게야지 돼서 녀수 잔시게 요래서.
Geshe said, why is he starting with this? He says, like the hard stuff right away. He says, maybe Ngodrup will complain. I didn't complain, just for the record, didn't. But anyways, so why are we starting with the hard stuff? Because we're actually in a part of the words of my perfect teacher that is relatively easy to understand. So Geshe wanted to just also put something challenging to contemplate, to think about in there as well.
오야 다음부터 비치야 치데레스 타티시 가서 가시요 알아왔어.
So then, in terms of where we are on, so if you have the Padmakara edition of Words of My Perfect Teacher, we are on about page 44. We are halfway down in the sentence that begins here in our human world.
오야 다 가서 뛰어서 살아와. 시기 더볼라서 때 못aba.
It's good. Yeah, Jigten.
매미미지 인된 것에 다 딜.
Ale, los.
시기 더볼.
Yeah.
시기 더볼라서 때 못aba gomba.
So the section where we are is the impermanence of those in positions of power.
다티 가시요 알시 주 말해. 또 못에 단전예가. 단전예가 그치.
So we talked first about the difficulties of finding the freedoms and richnesses, or I think it says here, the freedoms and advantages of a human rebirth. We talked about the impermanence of life. And so this particular section, the impermanence of those in power, this is part of that larger outline of the impermanence of life. And so here it says impermanence of those in positions of power. So when this text was composed, this would have been, kings and other king-like figures.
디 가랑 우시사 드레스.
So we talked a little bit about who the Lord of the Desire Realm was, and we connected this to the idea of the four maras. Specifically, that he was the fourth Mara, which is known as the Deva Putra Mara. So Deva means God, Putra is son of. So it's the Mara, son of the God. So this Deva Putra Mara, Geshe said, is connected in a lot of Buddhist cosmology to Ishvara. And if I'm not mistaken, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, because I know we have some people who are familiar with the Indian traditions. Ishvara is a form of Shiva, I believe.
다 데테르마트 다 뭐요아레 장유도 다 샤몬다마다요아레.
So Geshe said, like, this will be sort of the main sort of Lord of the Desire Realm, though of course there are many other celestial beings as well.
다 나로서 그 띵엔저가 녀래 다 숑바도 니지 다 던지 숑주가 세 토비 녀래래서는 다키 나보자야 돼. 니바메로 야르마디 예키 나보자 도야레스.
So if we are able to, with concentration, bring forth the realizations of love, compassion, and bodhicitta, we free ourselves from the yoke of Ishvara, from the yoke of the Lord of the Desire Realm. But if we do not develop those, we'll always remain within the sphere of influence of the Lord of the Desire Realm. So we'd already told a lot of stories about the Lord of the Desire Realm, so we're going to continue a little bit with the text. Here in our human world, there have been universal emperors who have reached the very pinnacle of power and material wealth. In the Holy Land of India, starting with Mahasamata, innumerable emperors ruled the entire continent. Later, the three Palas, the 37 Chandras, and many other rich and powerful kings reigned in both eastern and western India. So Geshe is remembering that one of those kings, and it may have been Mahasamata. Geshe is thinking he's specifically mentioned by Patrul here because this is one of the previous incarnations of the Buddha, right? That talks about in the Jatakas. So he'll have to check that, but he thinks that this is one of the previous incarnations of the Buddha. Di sang magiengöla, right? Yeah. So de du sang magiengöla ko shintong ola gomjagire, right?
Yeah, they are, yes.
Dene mi jenda kashingan so pumbo dabo. So at this time, the being who became the Buddha in his future lifetime, not in that incarnation, but in his future lifetime, he was sitting under a tree meditating. But at that time, in that particular kingdom, there was an absence of a leader. And so influential people were searching, thinking, who is going to be the leader of our kingdom? So people So Shintong ola ma de pe kapula nima nangla drona datung nakung tetsyure kola penya dabuchi. But people noticed that this man who had been meditating under the tree, even when he left the shade of the tree on like a bright sunny day, that shade would travel with him and protect him from the sun no matter where he went. So people thought, this person is really special, right? This person has this blessing to be protected from the sun no matter where he goes. So perhaps he should be our king. So Mahasamata, Geshe is saying, is the Tibetan rendition of this. I don't know if this is an accurate thing. Huh?
Tisu Gisholin up Maki or up and Bo.
Yeah.
What then was Mobokoa?
Mambukulwa.
Mombi Yakio.
Ale Mahasamata. So the meaning of how this word is rendered in Tibetan is the king who many people petitioned. So it's like a person who many people petitioned to be the king.
Chichin Mutsu Tinimasa Leva, you see.
Yeah.
Mutsu Tisu Mutsu to ask Gisholin. Did Logiti.
Yeah, so Geshe said that the Tibetan word that they use for Mahasamata, because it's talking about the one who was petitioned by many to be the king, he wonders if this meant that there was something like a democratic election, right? Where you would put a vote in the box for the person that you wanted. So there's more to tell about this story, but for now we'll continue in the text. Pe gangshengi jongsu. Lips.
No Sado Jaga Shana Jabonga to Jiba Tamashi, Pe Kunchi Junsago, Jinya Zembo, Chuba Hai Jabo Shamban is it. Nola Chudi Sala Le to Pala Deji, Zila, Zenga, Shipi Dura Shedon, just a Shendo Shipi, Dura Nala Sopa Sheji, Chijasu Gombijila, Anite Pavini, Me Janaga, Yoko Yeche, Jivi Mogito, Hasi Chason Deseji, Gurilla. Zombiligi 스닝 아고데 치자 레베 라바 첸제리라 자가 초어 공인도도 쫙지도리로데 자베제 사존제.
So in Tibet, the land of snows, the first king, Nyatri Tsempo, was of divine descent, an emanation of Bodhisattva Nivarana Vishkambin. Sorry, some of these Sanskrit words are so long. Then reigned the 7 heavenly kings called Tri, the 6 earthly kings called Lek, the 8 middle kings called De, the 5 linking kings called Sen, the 12.5 kings of the fortunate dynasty, including the 5 of the extremely fortunate dynasty, and others besides. In the reign of the Dharma king Sonsen Gampo, a magical army subdued all lands from Nepal to China. King Chisang Dutsen brought 2/3 of Jambudvipa under his power, and during the reign of Raupachen, an iron pillar was erected on the banks of the Ganges, marking the frontier between India and Tibet. Tibet exercised power in many regions of India, China, Gesar, Tajikistan, and other countries. Ale, okay. Sorry. Oh.
Yeah. Jaga Jana Kesar, Tazila, Soba Jaco Mombo. Najas Dini, Losacha Demo, Hasin leader, Nichila Le Gipe, Maton Yaba Soto, Tata Teta, which you Tozo Mato, Genu, maybe Nicala Sona, Rore Tati Ne Condon, Roche Cordon, Atola So, Jetso Zoma, Zawa Nojo, Namanola Pana, Jumi Tsonzo Le Mena, the Tabala, Tapado Temba, Jeno the Gomo.
At the New Year's festival, ambassadors from all those countries were required to spend 1 day in Lhasa. Such was Tibet's power in the past. But it did not last, and nowadays, apart from the historical accounts, nothing is left. Reflect on those past splendors, compare to them our own homes, belongings, servants, status, and whatever else we prize, seem altogether no more significant than a beehive. Meditate deeply and ask yourself how you could have thought that those things would last forever and never change.
What am Matoba go give it a surging yellish in a Tamatama, what at and Richi is that about them, but you Kangamatobi, Roger, and do some Mataya.
So we have to think about all of the reasons why things are impermanent. And then when we come to the end of that contemplation, to the end of that meditation, we can think everything lacks permanence. There is nothing that is lasting. All is in the nature of impermanence. So what is it trying to say here? Well, let's just begin with a caveat that in order to abide in this world, we need our basic necessities of life, food, drink, place to dwell, and so forth.
So the top seki watch chet do you are.
And so all of those things, right, that we kind of secure for our livelihood, we secure those things with the thought that they're going to contribute to our happiness.
다 이나요. 나로선 대바테 아니 자 체네 콘디스 som바 체네. 소소 다다 템보 마체나. 하코서라 어다 무르 그야 다 체르 논내라. 아니 딘 노요 તને 다 디스 som바 무기야 말이스.
But if we start to get into this pattern of collecting more and more of those wished for things, we'll never have a feeling that it's enough. We'll never have a feeling of satisfaction. And if we keep grasping in that way, what happens is all of our time is spent accumulating towards more and more of those things, but never being able to feel that it is enough, never being satisfied.
다 소서도 못도 맞춰도요 이사. 하코서라
가래당 밑은 봐.
소소. 소소 소소를 단 대고 기고시나 som바.
Yeah.
저기요 알아봤어. 잘한가.
Yeah.
이나요 단 대바 체르는 기본 매바 디존 알아봤어.
But this way of being, right, it doesn't ultimately make sense because there's an incongruence. If any of those things that we thought would make us happy, once we achieved them, we would feel happy and satisfied. But the fact that even after achieving them, we're striving more and more, this shows that this pattern is increasing our desire and actually making us more and more unhappy. That's the principle here. So when we contemplate impermanence, actually, when we come to the conclusion of that contemplation, the idea is that we feel more grounded and peaceful, right? Not nervous. So one of Nagarjuna's famous students, Aryadeva, he wrote a text called The 400 Verses. He said, those who possess fame and wealth, they experience more mental suffering. Those who dwell in poverty, they experience more physical hardship and suffering. So we can see the truth of that. And, ultimately, in terms of that mental suffering, what causes that to be a problem is the grasping at the permanence of that status and wealth, that grasping at permanence. So as long as we have an attitude of a too strong desire or attachment, this is always going to bring problems into our orbit in life. If we can develop contentment, thinking I have what I need, it is enough, and really begin to feel that, then a lot of that difficulty will dissipate. Even someone who is extremely wealthy, right? If they don't have this sort of concept of being satisfied, that feeling of contentment, no matter what they amass, they're never going to be happy. So this, in this way, cultivating that understanding is really a path to happiness. So it reminds Geshe of a story about a lama and his student. And this lama was known as being like, how do you say it? Like really grouchy, really short-tempered. Zamasena the bucket chambochi. So one of the students' tasks that he had was they had like these large clay, like earthenware pots, and he would have to go to the river and collect water.
Then you might put up with that Cosmology or Cosmology, it's going to cut the dongle son, was.
But, the attendant, he was young, so he liked to kind of joke around, run, and so forth. And when he was doing that, of course, what happened is one of the pots he was carrying fell and it broke.
That ripang bachimaton, Tagis and Stashes, Momoragre, Sonoton Cosile was.
So he was really scared because he thought, like, when I get back to the Lama, I'm really going to get it. He's really going to scold me terribly. So he was kind of thinking of what his response would be to the scolding. So when he met his teacher, he began with a question. He said, would you hold that all compounded phenomena are impermanent? Do you believe that all compounded phenomena are impermanent? And the Lama said, of course. And then he said, so by that reasoning, it follows that our clay pot where we keep the water, it is also impermanent. And he said, yes, it does. Of course. Why wouldn't it? So then he said, well, it's broken now. So then really, by proposing those reasonings, then he didn't really have any basis with which to scold him. So there's another story about this teacher and student that Geshe is remembering, but we'll share it maybe a little later. So does anyone know where that line, all compounded phenomena are impermanent, came from? Can anybody think of it? Just bring it into your mind and think if you can think of it. It's from like one of the core teachings. Seals. The 4 seals, Sam. Yes, it is one of the 4 dharma seals. All compounded phenomena are impermanent.
This one?
Yes, again. Yeah. So Geshe, he's writing down this story because there's another one he's not recollecting fully, so he'll prepare it for next time. So Geshe said, this is for those of you who are interested in Chagchen, in Mahamudra. You'll be interested to know that mudra means seal. And so within Mahamudra, there are 2 seals, the seal of the relative and the seal of the ultimate. Oh yeah, so the first of the 2 of the 4 dharma seals, all compounded phenomena are impermanent, and all contaminated phenomena are in the nature of suffering. This connects with the relative. This connects with the relative. And then when we come to that last seal of all phenomena are empty and selfless, this is going into the ultimate aspect of the Mahamudra. So if we want to sort of understand a little bit about that great seal teaching, we should understand it as the Mahamudra of the base, Mahamudra of the path, and Mahamudra of the result. So the base Mahamudra is the emptiness, that lack of inherent existence. And that's the same whether we are practicing the sutra, the exoteric aspect of Mahamudra, or whether we are practicing tantra, or the esoteric aspect of Mahamudra. So the wisdom that is comprehending that lack of inherent existence of the mind, semgi tompani dirwa, shepa. Yeah. Semgi Tompani,
Yeah, yeah,
Hakoedi.
yeah, yeah.
That wisdom that is understanding the ultimate empty nature of the mind. This is the path, Mahamudra.
This one,
Mhm.
oh, that the say to my Hakoki Shira, the Tashamba Chasona, Tumakanga Tasona.
So when that wisdom comprehends perfectly the emptiness of the mind itself, that wisdom is perfected.
This one,
No,
or
David.
ye long diverse data code, Lila Variant was.
That becomes the fruit Mahamudra, the result Mahamudra. So this is one way of teaching base, path, and results.
Oh, that's all sent to money, sorry. Ye Shaja sent to money.
Yeah, so when we talk about emptiness in the context of Mahamudra, it's mind seeing mind, right? So it is always the mind's emptiness that we're talking about. Yeah. The nganso di perna di semgi tompani so di geluk chakchen dabo chigre duwa rwa. Ine kaju chakchen koronso di semgi rangshen sange girik so dabo chik sogi mepatra.
Mimitate, machine of Mandatat, Mandavatat, the Mandavate, you chose us.
Loso.
Akasarava.
Loso. Lemon do that.
Mimi Konzo Devakari Nikara. Candice.
Nganso di chagshen seria di nganso utsu jabsa di semgi tompani re duwa rwa. Ine kaiju dang dinso konso semgi rangjen dabo chik lagire duwa. Dene di sange gi rik tets sa chewa. Semgi tompani le sange gi rik tets jogimen duwa.
Yo, may also good. So the Tana Tige. That reason I thought on that Shavakan.
Riksena sengi tompani.
Save to money, there's a degree or it.
So I was asking Geshe because actually it's interesting that Geshe is talking about this today. I didn't mention it to him, so I don't know. Sometimes it freaks me out. Geshe kind of knows stuff. So I was talking with somebody on WhatsApp today, and they were asking about the Mahamudra in the different traditions. And so I was asking Geshe. So for example, in the Geluk Mahamudra, there's very much an emphasis on the emptiness of the mind. There is very much an emphasis on the emptiness of the mind. But when we hear about the Kagyu Mahamudra teachings, right, often the language is a little bit different. And we talk about the mind's nature, or we talk about pointing out the nature of the mind. I said the language in the Kagyu sounds less like a negation of something being empty and more like an affirmation of the Buddha nature. Geshe said this may be so. There may be some difference with the language, but ultimately, when we come to the Tathagata Garbha, to the Buddha lineage or to the Buddha nature, that lineage is the emptiness of the mind itself. So when you come to sort of the conclusion of the reasoning, you're getting to the same point. But Geshe said, there is a substantial difference in the application practices between the sutra approach to Mahamudra and between the tantra approach to Mahamudra. So there are some scholars who are of the opinion that there is no sutra Mahamudra whatsoever, that Mahamudra is exclusively a practice of tantra. So we are on page 45. We are now on the next outline, which is other examples of impermanence.
Li Poncho, Pace Mombo, this is yes, a deshi Pozoba, Lano Landamba, Ejon, Yemobado Magi, Renji, no de Tatin the Tabo,
So just reading from there, as an example of impermanence, consider the cycle of growth and decline that takes place over a kalpa. Long ago, in the first age of this kalpa, there were no sun and moon in the sky, and all human beings were lit up by their own intrinsic radiance. They could move miraculously through space. They were several leagues tall. They fed on divine nectar and enjoyed perfect happiness and well-being, matching that of the gods. Gradually, however, under the influence of negative emotions and wrongdoing, the human race slowly degenerated to its present state. Even today, as those emotions become even more gross, human lifespan and good fortune are still on the decrease. So, so Geshe said that one of the things that he is planning to teach actually is a tantric text called the base presentation of the three bodies. And it is in that text that you will see it talks about sort of this devolution rather than evolution. It's a devolution of human beings. So, according to this cosmology, actually, during this sort of much earlier period, there was no sun and moon in the sky, and human beings kind of subsisted based upon a radiance, an inner radiance of their bodies. And their lifespans were kind of immeasurably long, very well beyond what we have now. Yeah, yeah. Loso. Yeah. So what happened is sort of initially they were subsisting, Geshe said, without sort of coarse forms of food. So he's thinking that they were subsisting kind of on the energy of samadhi, of concentration, and then slowly somebody decided to it's like it's kind of like the Adam and Eve story. So somebody was taking a bite out of an apple or a bite out of some sort of fruit, Geshe said, and then on that basis, then their body got used to that, and that required them to continuously eat. But it was such that the kind of plants there, they would spontaneously give rise to fruit continuously. Yeah. But some people got really lazy and they thought, I don't want to pick the fruit every day. Why would I want to do that? So when they saw the fruit on the tree, they just said, we're going to pick every single one and we're going to sort of hoard it. We're going to keep it in our house, and then we won't have to go out to where the trees are every day to eat. And so on the basis of people hoarding food, right, other people who maybe didn't get there fast enough, they started looking for it where others were keeping it, and this started the karma of theft, of taking what is not given. And so slowly, right, the other of the non-virtuous actions began to unfold. Marpo. Loso. Kushuma sangela e. Dawochi. Yeah, Hagusan. So Geshe said that before they ate the fruit, some versions of this story say that actually they just ate the earth. And it was a special kind of earth that was red in color and very delicious. And they were able to subsist just on that. Geshe said that in Tibet, to this day, there's places where you have this red kind of earth. Shimbudwe. And he himself has tasted it, and he found that it was quite delicious. So in this version of the story, what happens is as they started to kind of take that soil, they were taking like sort of a coarser form into their bodies. So the inner radiance that they possess began to diminish, and the body became sort of coarser. And on that basis, right, eventually like the fruits and so forth, the hoarding, and then all of those sort of samsaric activities.
다비요 먼저 녀모바 제라서 집용기 체체도 세노도지 마마 저때 탈 첼로 집이 바다 체체 좀 제뉴던도.
Mhm. So, even today, as these emotions become ever more gross, human lifespan and good fortune are still on the decrease. The process will continue until humans live no more than 10 years.
단당이노 지는 리치게서는 첼로 잡이 디레스.
Yeah.
가시게서는 첼로 늦지 자지도 와 이제레스. 근데 세키와레스 단당.
Chudang,
첼로 늦지 자지도. 늦지라고.
Dunju double, Dunju, Tungshu, Ale.
매미 디송.
Dinsang, Shua. Yeah.
가시게 첼로 잡이 디레스.
Right. So then Geshe said that in terms of the time where we are now, this is described by some scholars differently. Some say it's in the period of the 70-year lifespan or the 80-year lifespan. Others say that we are still living in the period of the 100-year lifespan. Nganzo mitse nangula migi lo cheru droneki nango didi kareches cheta. Instead of the long half shoes ngala the konzo truk shoes dabo.
just yores lila wore.
Ale.
로로서 테텔 가워제 메도 되지 강가 야르치 말이야.
이네 디당 칸데 디당 미튼 바레베스.
데마 탐바트세 메 베도 할레비 타치 고 라야만 되와. 자동 아체도 좀 문제와 단단히.
Ale.
So
I was asking Geshe then so I think I annoyed him with the question a bit, but anyways, maybe some of you are wondering. So I said, how do we reckon this with the fact that it seems like actually people are living longer and longer? So if you looked at maybe 50 or 60 years ago, 60 or 70 was considered a pretty ripe old age, but now people are 80 or 90. So Geshe said, well, yes, within this, of course, it's incremental. So if you look, science is developing, people are, have access to better food, they're more aware of exercising and things like this, medical care and so forth. So you have this longer span, but it's still within that fixed kind of 100 years, more or less. So according to this cosmology, what's going to happen is eventually lifespans will start to decline again. And it will come to a point where human beings live for about a decade or so, And when it gets down to that point, what's going to happen is there's going to be tremendous disharmony between human beings. Wars and so forth, are going to be fought. And so from these great wars that spread over the world, because so many people are being killed, the population that is the human population of the world is going to decrease immeasurably.
Same.
Ale. And so at this point, when the human population on the planet is very sparse, human beings, when they see different people from a distance, they'll become sort of excited because they're used to being in very small units or mostly by themselves. So it's at that time that Lord Maitreya, that the next Buddha of our time period, is said to arise. And at that time, he's going to build on those feelings of affection that beings have from being so isolated from each other. And he's going to talk about the benefits of love, the disadvantages of war, anger, and so on. Oh, sorry. Okay, so at this time, it's not the actual emanation body of Maitreya. It's like Maitreya in an ordinary aspect who gives these teachings. So he gives these teachings in a normal human form, and then beings taking those teachings to heart, there's less war and so forth, and correspondingly with less violence, the human lifetime increases, the human lifespan, increases.
tene ya lo tin tra lo tene che lo ye che ti se ma ya ndo ye che ti se ya sho ma tene pe.
And by the time human beings are living close to 70 or 80 years again, then the fully endowed emanation body of Lord Maitreya Buddha will appear in the world.
다 tene wo tan ga ya zo bele shi pe ni ma ta yung go chi chu ya res.
And then when as Maitreya turns the wheel of his dharma, there is a great a long and significant period of peace in the world.
다 ti ja ja da tin ri ga cha so mas ti ja ja.
So Geshe said, because that's a positive note, because that's kind of a nice thing, he is going to propose that we stop here. So we are stopping on page 45. Oh, geez.
다 자 yin be.
Yeah, Tajani.
wo ya tu che tene ga bin ne ge wa yo ko shu.
So thank you very much, Geshe said. And now that we have accumulated that those positive merits, let us nicely make a dedication.
tene 단단히 ya so 다 봐 자 yin ne tempo tu pa she ma to ba yin ai che lo je che ti se le so ne ja sho ma tu so ne ta le la wo re tu as.
So Geshe said that there is always hope in the Buddhist vision of things. So even if we mess up this lifetime and future lifetimes and don't bring forth realization, we can have some sort of confidence to hold on to, that through the efforts that we put in, when Buddha Maitreya comes into this world, we will be able to connect with him and be able to reach realization.
nge tu bo te ge shi te ba ta lo do je te ne je de ne de to ne tu ga ro chi ya po za ta as ko to.
Yeah, so one of Geshe-la's friends, Geshe Tempa, he jokes that in the text it talks about certain periods where there's an 80,000 year lifespan, and he says, when there's an 80,000 year lifespan, then I'll definitely have time to get enlightened. So that's when I'm really going to practice.
Ya tu che ga ya bo shu.
So let us, we'll do a short mandala since it's the last day of this round of the text, and then we'll dedicate the merits. So
bi je je me do cha ji ra li je ne de ge ba di sang ge jin de me de bo wa ye ro go nan da jin la che wa jo yi dang ge ratna mandala ko na ya da ya.
Dedications, Jangju, Zenju,
Rinpoche, ma je ba no, shenju chi, je ba nyam ba me ba yang, gane gonda be wa shu, toni tawa Rinpoche, ma je ba no, shenju chi, je ba nyam ba me ba yang, gane gonda be wa shu.
Next one down, Jigde. Oh, sorry. Next, yeah, down. Yeah, there we go. Jambe bao jita kyamba dong kundu zambo de yon de jing de da kungi je da lo je gewa du da tang je ra du mo du sun she be gewa tang je je ma wa gang na jo de nga wa de da gi gewe tsa wa di ku jong zambo je je ra de ngo wa gang ri ra we kon we jing kam dir ben da de wa ma le je de chin re zi wan de
Tenzo janso yin,
sha be si de
ado denjo. Roro soso sa pita ge Nepal tene tane, oda Berlin tela ta mage watu neyo, oda somba nge marno wari tu kawaii na yo pasha ne kange jila, somba xie to yachi.
So, through the power of the virtuous merits that I have collected, may all of the wars, diseases, environmental degradation, and so forth in this world be pacified. May the beings causing that harm who give rise to evil thoughts, may those evil thoughts be cleared away, and may they only give rise to thoughts of loving kindness.
Roro soso ta gyawa dhava yinare, chitsu ta an leka na sheke yinare, ta shinde cheke yinaya sudu se yinaya ta tandriga li zawa tiga senji yu zu la pake deshi ga nyama sha to ya jalan dhawa chi.
So then all of us who accumulate virtuous karma too, all of those of you who volunteer for the Dharma Center, all of those of you who contribute to the Dharma Center, who help the Dharma Center in all the various ways through those roots of virtue, dedicate that the sun of happiness may shine on all sentient beings without exception. Through these merits from lifetime to lifetime, may I constantly work for the welfare of sentient beings and eventually be able to reach the state of Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, perfect and complete enlightenment for the benefit of every last being. So as I always say, because I know folks are busy. If by the time we finish the dedication you need to get on with your day, please feel free. But also, if you'd like to stick around for questions, you are most welcome. And if anybody has a question, please go ahead. I think Deki Lee, I think Deki Lee, I think you're the one whose hand went up first. So maybe we'll start with you.
Thank you. Just this last bit that you were teaching about Maitreya coming in human form and then appearing in emanation body and bringing peace for many, many, many years. That's echoing in some ways the Kala Chakra myth, you know, the Kala Chakra war that takes place in that mythology and is left with this long period of peace. Where does that fit into the time frame?
Yeah, gotcha. Nanso nitsu ni yore dua roa nitsu tambo di gen tambo gawe jampa gi trulpa dabochik mi gi nampa dabochik mi tets shiwa sogres dene din nyarne dene tutsu rimpo gi jela gawe jampa gi trulpa chat sango dabochik legire duas dene dela tene zambuling la halepe tutsu rimpo shiwa dang tempo dabochik yores roa Inenganso yang dukor ginetsu di yore roa. Dukor ginetsu la mar partsur mambo jamna dene dukor gi la di kene dene dela tene di zambuling chatsangwa shambala gi dagjing dabochik chagi res roa. Netsu mendra ni dinso nyamdu kande samlo tango res. So Geshe said you're absolutely right, Deki Lee, that you have these kind of two different sort of narratives, let's use that word, narratives that you see with the stories of Maitreya and that you see with the story of Kala Chakra. Geshe's not 100% sure, but he thinks this is happening at different times. So the time of Maitreya coming and so forth, that's going to be different from the time of Kala Chakra and Shambhala. Because there's a lot of rising and falling of the fortunes of human beings and sentient beings, right? A lot of eons of the lamp and eons of darkness. So they're probably, these are happening at different time increments in those cycles.
And any idea which is first?
Tambo kagires gawa jampare. So this he is not sure. He's sorry. He doesn't know the answer to that one. He said it's a good question, but yeah, he has to tell you he's unsure of the answer. He's inclined to say Buddha Maitreya, but not 100% sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Deki Lee. I think, Emily, you were next, so if you want to go ahead.
I'm being silly. If you take apart your phone and would my phone app still work?
Oh, if you took apart... You want me to ask Geshe that?
Got it.
You can, but it's a joke.
Okay, yeah, it's a joke. No, I got you. I have to explain to him what the Find My Phone app is. I love it because I'm a person who tends to lose things. Nanso kapati pet chashe chatsama yewa chena. Dene soso tsu raya gi app chikiore, phone nye tubiaki app chikiore, di daltong drogire besa. Kutsemo tegire nachana.
Mimi 다 보고 게 출랑도 사기 빼셔요. 왔어. 데 데모레스도 미다. 뭔가 뭐베세네스 어떻게 저 주사 여기 놓아지가 왔어.
Yeah.
데 놓아서 마도 따와이나.
Yeah.
고시 오시나.
Yeah.
달라도 왔어.
Yeah, so Geshe said he's not sure. He's not sure, and he's not sure where the component of that Find My Phone app is, and he's not sure what part that Find My phone app is as a basis of designation. Maybe that Find My Phone app is the basis of designation for your phone, Geshe is saying. But anyways, in his example, the basis of designation of the phone was the assembly of all of these parts. Yeah.
That was a very good, very
He's not sure where the
understandable.
Find My Phone app is within those physical components, basically, is what he's saying. I don't know that either.
담마상에도 지치는 첨부지 놓은데 왔어.
It was a very good.
뭐베 출랑도 사기질 따와이나 뭐뱅이나서 해요. 말.
Yeah. So Geshe said maybe his line of reasoning also was a little bit faulty here, in that there's another question that arises. Does a phone that doesn't perform the function of a phone, is that still a phone? In other words, if the thing is completely broken and you can't make calls or do anything with it, if it doesn't perform the function of a phone, is it a phone? That's another thing to think about.
다 딜을 데버레스 가로라 다 도와치 먹을래 니젠달라요 도와 도케들 시월레스무스 빼나 못한다 보지나
Yep.
못한다 보지나 코너 류차송와서는 코 못하래 로근디 와스 로지지와 데 못하래 와스 주자기와.
Yeah. So, but Geshe said that he knows that Emily was kidding, but he actually kind of likes the direction of the question, because this can sort of have a different line of reasoning. So, for example, if we think of a car, 차시 차성원 ям두이나.
가가시에도 못하래 문디 와스. 강가 치르르 제너 고잘라 강가 초나.
Yeah.
콘로 토근디 못할 가시게 데 로지지 저근디 와스.
So, Geshe said that people who are making an argument for inherent existence, they might say this, okay, yes, if you disassemble the parts of a car, for example, if you take out like the engine and the wheel and the axle and all of those things, it can no longer perform the function of a car. But that does not negate the fact that when the assembly of those parts are in place, there is something that is functioning as a unit to get you from one place to another. And so that shows you that the car does, in fact, really exist.
다 델는 안 주고 레라 레기네 데. 대수자요 말 대로지지 매비 뭐뭐지라 때는 지쳐 받으래 다가로래.
So what would the Prasangika answer be to this? That yes, that is true, but it does not negate the fact that it lacks true existence, because it is only through the coming together of the various parts and being able to form a function through those coming together that there can be a dependently designated car, but not an inherently existent one.
난조 리더 지바로 왔어. 리더는 세대요나. 아까서라 때는 지쳐 봐이자 머레스. 세대 매소나 때인데요. 다니 너다 뭐 말해야 돼. 다 고추모조
로다 보러와.
다 대체 누가 간가라게 하면 돼와.
누가 간가가고. So Geshe said that, for example, too, this human body that we have, if a mind is inhabiting it, in other words, if there's a consciousness there, we'll say that that is a human. But if there's a non-animated human body, right, like a corpse, if the mind is not present, we'll no longer point at that physical form and say that it's a human. So we see already two kind of aspects have to come together for us to designate that human.
다 딜미면 또 받아보지 때문에 그지요 할까래요 보다나. 그냥 간소이라 밀라 원 말이면서.
So Geshe said he likes that question from Emily because it gives a different angle of thinking about things. And part of what we want to do is examine things from many, many different angles when we're using this line of reasoning.
I have one other short one.
Yeah.
If the humans are only living to be 10 years old, then nobody will reach puberty and we won't be able to reproduce.
Yep. Nganso misere di konso lo chu malebna dene koronso puku ke tugiomares. Karinsana lo chu kablo nganso puku so tugiomares. Puku so mi tubne dene migi kewa suyina len tugiomares.
말에 오다 코로를 빠피 지체는 레게 또 지용시 바치러 왔어. 지체는
So
레게
tugire.
또 지체는 오빠게 될 빠피 오 코로 지용시 바치러 왔어.
So Geshe said that he's not sure that's the case because he's been hearing that actually puberty is happening sooner and sooner, but also he's thinking that by the time that goes, the time when people can create children, maybe it will be less. So those things are not necessarily going to stay the same, right? All of those sort of natural laws are also in flux.
Yeah.
So he doesn't think you can say that how things are now is how they're always going to be.
Thank you
You're welcome. You're welcome.
for my silliness.
Oh, no, I think it was an interesting conversation we had. So thank you, Emily. Abhilash, is there anything on socials or is there a hand that I'm missing?
No, I don't see any questions on Facebook.
So if there's no questions, Geshe is going to finish with a story. So we'll do a short story and then we'll call it a day. So this is also from a previous lifetime of the Buddha when he was still a bodhisattva. And in this particular life story, he was a king of a particular land. And so this relates to kind of a mentality that we have. And Geshe said that it's very much related to the present moment because most of us, we are in countries where we somehow think that all of those terrible wars that are happening, all of those natural disasters that are happening, those are all things that are far away from us. So like they're happening to other people, but they're not necessarily going to happen to us. So this relates to the story. But anyways, going back to the story, at that time, it was before the Buddha's complete enlightenment. He was a bodhisattva. And the realm that he was ruling over as king, there was a terrible famine. There was a terrible famine and people could not even get the basics to sustain themselves. And so this started a very vicious and unforgiving karmic cycle because, of course, due to the lack of food, due to people being desperate, they began to steal from each other. And as others tried to protect their things from being stolen, there started to be outbreaks of violence. And due to that violence, the karma of the people in that kingdom became more and more contaminated, and they experienced more and more suffering. So they had to have a meeting, and in the meeting they said, ultimately this famine started with the rain not falling. And because the rain was not falling, the crops were not able to sprout. But anyways, now we are in this kind of helpless situation. What should we do? So some of the more evil-minded ministers, they said that, in order for the rain to fall, we have to please God with some wrathful offerings. So we should kill sentient beings and offer their blood and their flesh to God. And then once that has happened, then we can hope for more rain. And so Geshe said, actually, this point about offering flesh and blood as a way to have rain and so forth. It's still in some parts of Nepal and in other parts of South Asia, there's still people who make those kind of offerings. And even amongst Tibetans, and so His Holiness has really advised strongly. They're called marchut, red offerings. He's advised very strongly against making those offerings, but still some of those habits are there.
다 던디셰 비가라 다 손지기 다 야 시왕가마 이디게 손지 삼바 잡어라와스 디게서나 다 던디 마레스 럼바 tombo텔라 세제 네바 파자스 세제세야 럼바 tombo텔라 머르지다 즈바시 그만까 네바시게 설레바이나 델 tombo체바체스
So the Buddha at that time, before his enlightenment, he was a bodhisattva. He said that, this is not the kind of offering that we need to make. And the kind of offering that we need to make is our own restraint from negative actions, from killing, from theft, and so forth. So what we need to do is make sure that everyone is restraining from negativity. Not, we will find a way for them to be punished. So this was the kind of way forward that he proposed.
Tani chabatuguma ane jane senjela ta ganti kangeta tani rumani pa isikecha.
Again.
Tani dijila.
Yeah.
Te peto mundiuna. Tani senjela kangeta.
He said, if after we refrain from those negativities and after we pass those new laws, the rain hasn't fallen, then we can look at other things. But this is what you should do.
Tani te turned out with Aisa, tas net never shiki carlena conia pachimoraga Isa, Pati never mashi, Kangashawa, Yapochana, Tani chaba. So
what happened is, of course, as those laws were passed, there were consequences for negativity. Beings were less violent to each other. They were not stealing from each other. And due to that, their karmic fortunes improved, and eventually the rain began to fall. So whether things are going well in the world or not depends very much upon the activities of sentient beings, collectively, as a whole. And so we really need to ask ourselves, are we contributing to something more positive or not? Because this world which we inhabit, which is our abode, the manifestation that it has is very much connected with every single one of our actions. If we are kind and respectful to each other, if we commit to not harming each other, karmically that means this abode of the world that we abide in gets better and better. As we decrease our greed and negativity, even the imbalances in the four elements that cause natural disasters, these will be fewer and fewer. So that's, right, starting on the individual level, what we all hope can manifest collectively, right? And that's how things improve for all of us. So thank you very much. Geshe-la will leave it here. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Enjoy your Sunday, and don't forget, next Sunday, Vajrasattva initiation. For those of you from afar, this is available, but as live stream only. So it will be on Zoom only. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much, everybody.